Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and this video we're breaking down Welcome to Derry. Episode 3 is now here, and this week gives us a hell of a lot of answers. The entry expands greatly on the lore, and it's filled with more Easter eggs than the kitchen at Ironworks. Oof. It even features a cameo from the director himself, and really gets things going. So yeah, let's get going ourselves and skip over a long intro and just jump into the episode.
Who are you?
Okay, so the entry opens up in 1908. 1908, a very important year in the town, as it's when Bob Gray came with a travelling circus. This was alongside his daughter, who later became Mrs. Kirsch. I feel like we see her later on in the episode, but we'll talk about that more in just a bit. During the formation of Derry though, Pennywise took on numerous different guises. The first of these were predators, which we saw in Mike's vision. As soon as people saw them though, they instantly started running, so Pennywise had a lot of difficulty catching them. Thus, it started to take the form of a human. However, this was still monstrous, and in a deleted scene, we were going to see the character's early form. During one of the library scenes in chapter 1, we were going to get the backstory on the painting we get some focus on. This shows a woman going to a well with her holding a baby in her arms. Now this well is where the house on Neobold Street would later be formed at, and she was giving over her kid to the creature. A deleted scene was then going to show Pennywise in the well, looking like a red balloon, mate. So yeah, that's kind of what it was originally. Now it was only upon the arrival of the circus that Pennywise realised something. It could take on the appearance of a clown, and this would make people lower their guard. Pennywise always had difficulty acting human, and eventually the cover would break and the weirder side would come out. Like, he couldn't just stand and have a 45-minute conversation about baseball or something. However, clowns were expected to act strange and funny, and thus this was the perfect guise. So it's very important here. 1908 was also the year of the kitchen at Ironworks, which saw an explosion that killed 88 children, and it featured in the intro as well. There you can also spot Pennywise's car, so I think it's all tying back to this. Now in the background we hear is Shine On Harvest Moon plays. A harvest moon actually appears red, which fits in with Pennywise's style in the franchise, and is possibly a nod to red balloons. Either way, 1908 is a year that in its cycle is taking place, and as we're later told, 1935 was the most recent cycle. The show's creators have stated that each season will be the previous cycle, so season 2 will be 1935 and season 3 will likely be this one. However, that's all hinging on whether they get more entries. But yeah, judging by how popular the show's been, I think we'll likely get them. We then cut to clowns being knocked down, which is of course a big theme in the show. This is similar to the opening of it chapter 2 where we saw clowns being used. There Adrian filled up a red balloon with a water pistol, and that happened before being attacked by a reincarnated Betty Ripson. Look, it's a big thing. If you want to learn more about the reincarnation stuff, check out our video about every hidden Pennywise throughout it chapter 1 and 2. But yeah, the Canal Days Festival was something that Pennywise appeared at. There's also a lot of focus on slingshots, and a child's toy turned weapon was a major part in how the kids defeated Pennywise the first time in the book. While it was a part of the 1990s miniseries, the movie opted to make it Mike's bolt gun instead. In the book, in the original television adaptation though, Bev was the best shot and she fired a big blast at the clown. Sort of like how they get knocked down in this opening. Now it chapter 1 of course didn't feature that, and instead it had her kidnapped by Pennywise. So it does feel like Machete's making up for not using it in the movies by making it a major part of this episode. Rose basically takes on the proto-Bev role, and she's the one who smacks the creature like the like button. Looking at the banners, we can also see the Skeleton Man, which foreshadows it's scaring a young Shaw. Other attractions are being advertised as well, which fits in with the freak show type of circus that was popular in the early 20th century. These shows were made popular by the legendary P.T. Barnum, and you could say it was the greatest show. Now, there are also twins, which did make me think of the twins from The Shining. In the movie, the Grady twins are seen holding hands, and considering the Halloran connection, it might not be that much of a reach. I'll let myself off there. Now it's here that we meet the young General Shaw, who's making his way to the circus. I was wondering how the army were aware of the creature, but seeing this, yeah, just filled in all the blanks. We learned throughout the episode that he had a friendship with Rose, and I'm guessing that these characters might return if we get to season 3. As Shaw turns up, there's a buggy behind him, which might be the one that we see later with Dick. We then see the ball toss again, which features a Native American, a clown, and a turtle. The native is of course foreshadowing the tribe's appearance in the episode, the clown is very obvious, and the turtle is of course a nod to Maturin. In case you don't know, Maturin's basically a space turtle who's the natural rival of it, and it helped to guide Bill and the Losers Club on how to defeat Pennywise in the book. Yep, it sounds mental, and to be fair, it is mental. But yeah, the series is laced with turtles, and we've seen them referenced in the show in both Bert and the Cracker Jack prize. And I feel like we're gonna get a hidden turtle every entry. Someone then hits the clown with a ball, which again is how it was defeated in both the book and movies. Why I'm bringing this up though is because it gets hit twice in a row, and it has to be beaten twice by the Losers Club in order to vanquish it, which I did feel this was thematically showing. Shaw then sees what appears to be a Pennywise character holding red balloons. They're sitting on the steps of their caravan, which looks like the ones we saw in Chapter 2 when Bev met Mrs. Kirsch. This was down in the sewers as well, and it's where Pennywise bust out those dance moves at, which of course also later appears when Dick meets the clown. The human Pennywise was also seen putting on their makeup during Bev's time with Mrs. Kirsch. Now I actually believe that this person in the full getup is Kirsch herself, and we might get to meet her more in the season. Now, you might also notice they have bells in their hair, which is such a cool detail. This is because these bells could be heard when Pennywise says their name to Georgie in Chapter 1.
Well, I'm Pennywise the dancing clown.
There's also someone selling candy floss, which is something Pennywise said was at the circus when talking to Georgie. And yeah, he basically used everything we see here to try lure the character into the drain. Which, yeah, is it a good idea going into the drain, Georgie? Is it a good idea? No, and you deserve to die, and I'm glad you're dead. We also see a man selling balloons, which I feel are deliberately not red, to show that Pennywise hasn't infected the circus yet. Shaw's then invited to the freak show tent by the creepy ringmaster, and the wind blows his head over his face, which did remind me of the slideshow scene in Chapter 1. We saw Pennywise appear on screen with their hair blowing during that, and this ringmaster may even be one of its forms. It's leading people into a house of fear, which we know the cosmic entity feeds on. Later on, when Shaw rushes out the funhouse, we see him look up and stare at him intently. It's probably not due to the rules of the forest, but yeah, just difficult to not suspect every adult of being it. The hat is also reminiscent of Rose the Hat from Dr. Sleep, which is another of King's works. These parasitic vampires were a lot like Pennywise, and they also said that kids taste better scared. I think the True Knot would be a great addition to the show, as they've been around for a long time. As the seasons go further back in time, you could also do something where you see them de-aging, which would be so cool, and yeah, I think they'd fit right in with this show. I mean, even the Skeleton Man reminded me a lot of Grandpa Flick from that story. The Freak House main attraction is also similar to the Funhouse from It Chapter 2. There's a wall of mirrors, just like the one that Bill went through when trying to save the kid. Here though, they're all distorted, and it nicely adds the idea that they're entering an altered reality. We then hear a man playing piano, which is none other than Andy Muschietti himself. There's also a werewolf boy, we all remember looking up them on the internet, mate, and what appears to be a giant in a cage. It's all very kind of Nightmare Alley-ish, which they've actually just released the director's cut on that, which I've been watching, which is why it's there, but it just reminded me of that, and it's out. I'm not getting paid to say this. Do I have to say it's a sponsored ad? It's not. What the tent's filled with, though, is adults viewing the exhibits, and we even catch a glimpse of a skull illuminated by lantern light, which I thought was very reminiscent of Pennywise's trademark glowing eyes. The Coin-Join twins are dancing, and Shaw then goes into the back and meets the Skeleton Man. If he looks familiar, then this is the guy who plays the man in yellow in From. The lad seems absolutely petrified, which I can totally understand, and he then quickly dashes out. However, I don't think that this is actually Pennywise. Instead, I think it's like how Pennywise creates visions of things you're scared of. For example, in the book, Richie was frightened of werewolves after seeing a movie about werewolves. Pennywise then appeared like that when he next encountered him. Also, again, the rules of the forest, he can't leave the forest, so I think this is just a normal guy. Now, the way he appears in the dark and also asks him to come closer, I do feel like that's playing off the clown in the sewers thing. It is sort of a motif throughout the series, but yeah, they're just playing into that to make something very creepy. Shaw then runs out into his father, who looks like he's walked straight out of Red Dead Redemption. He then says,
"Don't be a damn sissy, Francis."
Which shows he's a harsh man and might be the reason that Shaw's inspired to fight fear with his project in 1962. Shaw has mentioned how his dad fought in every war from the Indian ones to the Philippines, so he might also not be too happy with his son playing with Native Americans. However, this does also explain why Shaw's not a racist, and when he sees people being racist, he's like, fuck off. Now, from what we can gather, he was only proud of his son when he signed up to fight in World War I. America's entry into that conflict is only 9 years away when this scene takes place, but it is interesting that even with all that, this is the thing that Shaw wants to destroy when it comes to fear. He is kind of even fighting things on different fronts. For example, he's using the army to fight against people, but also using the army to fight against it. Now we learn his dad's currently being kept behind the desk at the Derry base, which is why they live there and also have to move later in the episode. Now it turns out that his dad won him a slingshot, which shows just how much he wants his son to be like him. Just like how Leroy wants Will to be like him as well. The young Pennywise looking character then watches Shaw as he leaves, and again, I do think this is the daughter from the picture. We'll get into the rest of the journey in just a bit, but firstly, a quick word from our sponsors. This video is sponsored by ZocDoc, your brand new healthcare superpower exclusively for our viewers in America. ZocDoc is a free, game-changing healthcare platform that connects you with top-rated, in-network doctors in your area. Imagine this, you open ZocDoc, type what you need, and boom, you can instantly check appointments in your area and book one with a local doctor instantly. Real doctors, real reviews from other patients, and real open slots that you can instantly book. No awkward phone calls, no hold music for 45 minutes, just click, book, done. Whether it's mental health, dental care, eye care, skin care, or beyond, ZocDoc has you covered. ZocDoc offers access to over 100,000 healthcare providers across nearly every specialty. Shows real-time appointment availability as well, so you can pick a time that fits your schedule. Most appointments also happen within 24 to 72 hours, and same-day visits are often available. Don't delay those doctor visits. Head to my link in the description at ZocDoc.com/heavy-spoilers. There you can find and book a top-rated doctor today across various specialities. Visit ZocDoc.com/heavy-spoilers to explore their free revolutionary platform and find the perfect doctor for you. Thanks. Now on the drive, the car overheats and this leads to a chance meeting between Shaw and Rose. He doesn't have enough change, so he then trades a slingshot for the water instead. The car also looks like it's a Ford Model T, but that didn't come out until October 1908. So I hope someone got fired for that blunder. His friendship with Rose blossoms over the summer though, much like how the Losers Club made their mates. However, he accidentally runs into Pennywise's domain. This is part of the Barrens, and it looks like where the Losers Club built their clubhouse at in 1989.
It was already dug out from something.
When the movie came out, I was wondering how they had time to build this, because we spent the summer with them, and then in the next movie they're like, oh yeah, we also have a scene where we built the clubhouse. And it did seem like a bit of a retcon to add more scenes with the kids in. However, Don Amadino on Twitter, he messaged me the other day and pointed out this may have in fact been done by the airbase, which I think works really nicely in hindsight. Now this is also likely to where it crashed long ago, and they say it doesn't leave the woods, so you get the impression that the tribe may have placed a spell on the area. However, I do wonder how Pennywise was able to leave, as the creature clearly gets out. This might be something we explore in the next cycle, and there could be a number of different reasons. The town may expand into this area and cut down the woods, and thus the houses that the victims live in could be over where the forest was. I think what's more likely though is that the tribe gets beaten by the creature, and thus they're no longer able to contain it. Because yeah, come 1935, he's doing matrix dives out of windows and shooting gang members. Shaw's spooked by the skeleton man though, who peeps out from behind a tree. It's just like how Pennywise did the same thing in the human form when scaring Lilly last week, and this is a manifestation of Shaw's greatest fear. However, the creature can't really hold it together long. Failing to catch him and clearly being frustrated, it then turns into a beast that crawls on all fours. It's pretty elongated and looks very similar to Mrs. Kirsch in It Chapter 2. We then see the mouth turn into Pennywise's creepy sharp teeth, which we saw in Chapters 1 and 2, and in the mother's belly last week. I do wonder if it was going to try and get the kid in its deadlights, and this would have happened had Rose not arrived. Luckily, she's a master shot with the slingshot, and we get a scene that calls back to both the miniseries and book. The miniseries saw Bev hit a similar shot on Pennywise, but the blood floating up is like what we saw in the movies. Bill shot Pennywise with the unloaded bolt gun, and then the blood floated up outside its head, going against gravity, which you can see happening here as well. We then catch up with poor old Lilly at Juniper Hill. The outside of the building looks vastly different in Chapter 2 when we see the hospital in 2017, I want to say. So maybe they had to move due to the controversy of giving kids lobotomies.
But if she has another episode, we may want to discuss a more restrictive treatment plan.
The doctor mentions how he's upped her dosage of chlorpromazine, which is a tranquilizer. Sounds like she'll have some harsh treatments if she has another episode, and Pennywise knows what she fears the most, so yeah, it's only a matter of time before he makes her go crazy in public again. That was $1 worth of pickles, you scumbag. Off to get your lobotomy. Looks like a horrible place for anyone to be at though, let alone a young girl. We hear screaming and see a man crying on his bed, but there is a lady in the TV room watching what appears to be a Looney Tunes cartoon. It's got Foghorn Leghorn in it. So hey, maybe not that bad after all. Looney Tunes is of course a Warner Brothers property though, with that studio being the one behind this franchise. This is also similar to how the inmates were watching Tom and Jerry when Pennywise came back to Henry in 2016. Yes, we got it. Lilly's mother's here to pick her up after her pickle-fueled nightmare last week, and we catch up with her and see she's forged a bond with the head of housekeeping. She's played by Madeline Stowe, and actually seems like the only nice adult in town. There's a cross above her bed, which implies that faith plays a big part in the asylum, and religion was also much more prevalent in everyday society in this era of history. We even see a cross later in the prison cell. Now, even though Lily's real mother's not that sensitive, luckily she has a figure here who is quite nice to her. As we mentioned lots of times in our breakdowns, an adult in Derry is very rarely nice. The Derry curse makes them blind to the horrors the children are seeing, and if something bad happens, they often look the other way. Stowe's character, though, validates Lily's visions, and I do wonder if she's some sort of manifestation of maturing, especially as she hands Lily the charm bracelet that had the turtle that Maddie gave her. Considering she's actually nice to Lily and believes her story as well, then I don't think that we've seen the last of this character. It's also possible that this is a secret character who we touched on before and who we know comes back down the line. Well, in some form anyway. If we're right about the clown at the start being Mrs. Kirsch, then this could be her all grown up. We'll then potentially see what happens to her in the series for her to then become one of Pennywise's guises. And I'm not a rapper. If the creature killed her dad and took his form, then it makes sense she'd be more accepting to what Lily's seeing. But yeah, that's just a big theory time for the moment. I don't really do the theory time jingle that much anymore. Should I bring it back? F in the chat if you think so. Now we then cut to Hank, who's in jail after the kids' murders were pinned on him. Chief Bowers goes to see him and offers a Pall Mall cigarette, which is the same brand that Bev smokes in the book. It's also the brand that King used to really enjoy, which he did mention in the introduction to the Dark Tower series. However, Hank prefers Embassy Golds. This is a British brand that ain't too popular in America, and it is one you may recognise if you grew up watching snooker and darts. Bowers mentions he saw Hank as a Pall Mall man and a regular James Coburn. However, while the actor was in Japanese tobacco adverts, he wasn't the Pall Mall man. Lee Marvin was the man in those commercials, which Hank ends up mentioning, showing off his knowledge of Hollywood. Because yeah, he works at the cinema and runs a second-rate YouTube channel like me probably. Bowers is still trying to pin the murders on him though. There's a fake witness and a pack of Embassy Gold was found near the theatre. Bowers says he doesn't believe the alibi that he was in bed, and in episode 2, Hank's mother did say that he was there watching the Andy Griffith show. But yeah, it doesn't matter, he doesn't believe him and he's pretty screwed. However kids, having just done a big breakdown on the Zodiac movie, which will be coming to the channel soon, this is what's known as circumstantial evidence, and not really anything that will say whether or not he definitely killed those kids. Because yeah, I'm a hotshot lawyer and I'll say, look, he smokes cigarettes, he works at the cinema, that box was found outside, he probably just left it there, and who's to say when it was left there? So yeah, I don't know if Bowers has him as banged to rights as he says he does, which is probably why he's trying to force a confession. It's also rich of Bowers to say that he tries to expose liars when he's pinning the murders on an innocent man. As he says though, child killers have a target on their backs at Shawshank, which is a great little Easter egg. The prison, of course, featured in the story Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption, which was written by Stephen King. This, of course, then got made into a movie, which is one of the greatest films of all time, and we may do a breakdown on it one day. Shawshank, though, has been featured or mentioned in multiple Stephen King works, and was actually mentioned a few times in It. This was mainly in the opening with the murder of Adrian, and basically we did learn that those who attacked him ended up getting sent there. But yeah, I did wonder if we'll see Hank get sent to Shawshank, and we may even watch him bump into Red and Andy from the story. Because in 1962, they were still at the prison, so I'm praying for that Easter egg. Like Hank, Andy was also wrongfully convicted, so it fits in with the story here, and I think would just be a really nice little addition. Back at the school, poor Ronnie's then stared at as she walks down the corridor, much like Lily was in episode 1. Both scenes are remarkably similar, and they both end with the girls having their lockers defaced. The news of her father's arrest has made it around Derry, and Ronnie's locker has graffiti saying, "Hatchet Hank's gonna fry." Now actually, Maine doesn't have the death penalty, so he won't fry. However, I do wonder if they're going to bring in the Cold Mountain Penitentiary, which was in King's work The Green Mile. The text is also written in red, which reminds me a lot of the infamous red rum writing from The Shining. Not to mention that Dick Halloran is also in the show. It's also another brutal nickname as kids called Stan Kirsch Stanley the Cleaver. Ronnie then looks around and sees the patty cakes girls smiling, which insinuates that they were the ones who did this. And they did the pickles with Lilly. She then tries to remove the paint, only to end up with red on her hands. It's of course a very on-the-nose visual allegory that implies she has blood on her hands. Ronnie has survivor's guilt over what happened and may feel responsible for the kids' deaths. Will's mate then says that this is America, you can't just throw people in jail for nothing. Now this is quite an important line, and it's the same thing that Bowers said when the town council were pressuring him to pin the deaths on Hank. So I do wonder if it's even something Pennywise has hypnotized the town into thinking, so they don't question it when people go to jail. After all, Pennywise has operated so long because the murders often get pinned on others. Henry Bowers will of course take the fall one day and people won't question this further. Will though is new to the town and like his mother, he's not under the spell yet. He even asks if he's talking about the same country as he comes from Shreveport down south where he's no doubt seen lots of wild injustices every day. And also I said Shreveport on the last video, people were like, you've pronounced it wrong. Comment below how I should pronounce it. Make sure you write it. Boost engagement. Hit the thumbs up. Ronnie then attempts to wash the makeup off as it looks like blood in the sink, calling back to the blood in the sink that Bev saw in chapter 1. Lilly then comes in trying to make right and she brings with her some rubbing alcohol. The Juniper Hill staff member said she'll have to find a way to make amends and this is the start of her rebuilding her relationship with her. Lilly says how she'll tell the police what she really saw and tells her that she had another vision after their argument. The adults in police though won't really believe them and thus they need to get photographic evidence, which very simple mate, just take a photo of Pennywise. As they say though, if they take it to Keen's to get developed, they won't get it back. Luckily, Ronnie knows Will can develop some photos for them. That gives them the scene at the end, which is right out of Stranger Things, and I will talk about my theories on where I think it's gonna go, but yeah, I don't think it'll be as easy as they think. Speaking of photos, we then join Shaw looking at a picture of the Bradley gang's car. They found nothing, but it was giving off psychic energy. There's also a photo that shows the aftermath of the shootout, which was mentioned in the book. Mike wanted to put these up in display in the Derry Library, only for it to then be vetoed by the Derry's Lady Society, who we might have seen at the butcher's last week. You can see the building on the left though, and this appears to be the same one from the intro, where Pennywise was jumping out Matrix diving from. There's also a face on the ale sign, which does kind of resemble clown paint. Either way, this confirms that the car was indeed part of the Bradley Gang massacre that we talked about last week. Now this all comes from the book, and in one of the interludes, Mike interviews Mr. Keen and learns that the town executed the wanted fugitives in an almighty shootout. It was a moment of madness for the town, and the car had enough psychic energy for Dick to be able to find it. Fuller then mentions how the entity was spotted at the massacre, which is just like the book. There he said it was in farmer overalls and may have come from the circus out of town. We even saw the early Pennywise inspiration at the start of the episode, so I do wonder if we may get to see the massacre at some point as well. Again, season 2 will be the previous cycle, so we'll probably get the events of the 30s and learn more about this. Now Shaw wants to get Halloran flying over the nexus of its activities, which will be the woods that he experienced as a kid. I'm guessing that this is where Pennywise's asteroid crashed at that we saw during Mike's fishing. The general then pulls out a cigar box, which we later learn contains the slingshot he had as a kid. It's imbued with Pennywise's energy as Rose used it to damage it in the forest. Don't know why they had to dig the car up first, but using this, Halloran will be able to track the clown's location as it has more energy than the car. And yeah, you could have saved a lot of time getting this out early. We then cut to the main man himself as he's hanging out with his mates, and he's very adamant that he hooked up with Aretha Franklin. This is a deep cut though, as she was actually mentioned in The Shining. In that book, as he was driving back to the Overlook, a music came on, which he was very happy with. Which I bloody bet he was! But yeah, very, very deep cut. He even says how she wrote a song about him, and his mate says,
"Yeah. Won't be long."
The water then crashes through the roof of the tent, and the hangout's clearly not fit for purpose. Storms actually precede the coming of Pennywise, which is why it was chucking it down before Georgie got attacked. It looks like that weather's also happening here, and it's raining so bad that it's coming through the roof. But yeah, in the age of segregation, the white people weren't too bothered about housing the black GIs. They're drinking Coke, which also shows they can't really drink on the base. We also had this shot of the city which had a Coca-Cola advert there, so they're probably sponsoring the show or something, and yeah, it's also a little Easter egg from the books. This is because the black soldiers weren't allowed to drink in the NCO club, and Mike's dad mentioned how they'd serve soft drinks on the weekend, which is what we see here. The guys actually weren't weren't allowed to drink in town at all, and this was due to the racist town council. We saw that last week when Chief Bowers asked the barkeep to kick out Dick and his mates. His friend then asks him to get them an upgrade using his special privileges, which is something he also mentioned last week. Dick does end up getting them that though, as Shaw owes him a favour after his flight over Pennywise's lair. So yeah, this is setting the groundwork for the black spot, and in the end, the lads are given an old shed. Now as for the black spot, we have mentioned this a lot in our breakdowns, and in the book, Fuller was the one who set them up with it. It became a major night spot in Derry, which led to the Legion of White Decency burning it down. I do think we'll see that happen in the series, and that we'll build towards that, and that'll be one of the final episodes. 60 people died in the fire, and in the book, Will, who was the guy at the army base, not his dad Leroy, he told Mike that he went to school with some of the kids whose dads wore hoods that night. When Mike asks him why they did it, he just solemnly replied by saying, "It's just Derry." He then talked about how bad things tend to do well in the soil of the town, and Pennywise of course has an influence over everything. So I do kind of feel like we will see that scene with it being burnt down, and then probably have that conversation with Leroy and his son. Anyway, Dick's then sent out on his mission, with Paulie and Leroy being assigned as his pilots. Masters has been sent away, and Leroy's keeping Russo in the dark about the whole secret mission. He is of course Cuban, and after this, he might finally fill him in on what's really going on. But I do wonder if it is going to cause issues, because yeah, he is Cuban and they're fighting against Cuban people. They then ask what's in the box, but are told they wouldn't understand. Touching the slingshot, he becomes a compass for the Chinook and guides them to where the energy is strongest at. We then see Shaw and Rose in the aftermath of the Pennywise attack in 1908. The entity can't leave the woods, but again, something has clearly happened since then, as Pennywise was definitely inside Derry come 1935. I do wonder if they'd built a sewer system by this point, and this allowed it to move through the tunnels under the town. We then watch her transition to older Rose, which is such a cool effect. They actually did something in It Chapter 2 very, very similar when they had old Eddie change back to the young one. Although there it was done with fade-ins, which is also an effect that they do with Rose later on. Either way, Rose is told by Taniel that the army have dug up the Bradley gang's car. She says how he and his friends aren't supposed to get involved, as he's needed. Now I believe this is implying that Taniel's been trained to conduct the ritual of Chud should Pennywise escape. The book tells us this was actually a Himalayan ritual in which you'd go against a glamour, which is the species that it is. You then lock tongues and tell it a joke, and if they laughed, they'd be banished for 100 years. The movies changed this up, so it was a lot less, let's say, king on cola, but I still think he's gonna remain behind. We do know from Mike's vision that the natives failed to do the ritual last time, and we could possibly see this failure happening in the series, as they aren't there for the 80s at all. I did even wonder if Taniel might be who Mike talked to during It Chapter 2. The natives are understandably concerned about the military's expansion into the local area though, and Rose and co have no idea what the dig sites are for. So they're very worried they'll stumble across the evil in the forest. Although, yeah, some have clearly been kept in the dark about it because they're asking how much money they would get for the land. But I'm sure they'd all agree to it if they knew that Shaw wanted to use the entity as a weapon against communism. Which is still a big swing, in my opinion. It's still a big swing. Rose then decides that they should send a cease and desist letter, opting for the legal route, which is something that the rest of the meeting disagrees with. This cease and desist letter, though, is what brings Shaw to her store, and when he visits her, we learn it's been 50 years since they last saw each other. This store, of course, returns in It Chapter 2, and we see it still carries her name. Now, upon seeing her, Shaw says he didn't remember Derry or even her at all. She responds, though, by saying Derry does that to people. This is something that we saw in It Chapter 2, where the Losers Club didn't remember their childhood. It wasn't until Mike called them that everything came flooding back. It's an allegory for childhood trauma, as adults sometimes repress things that happened to them as kids. Each one of the losers had a terrible childhood they were trying to forget, and that was even without the killer clown being involved in it. But yeah, the whole thing is just a metaphor for like pressing down trauma, and then when you're older, it normally comes bubbling out and you have to deal with it. The book is also shown from the perspective of them as adults returning to the town and then flooded with memories from when they were younger. Pennywise made them forget in the hopes they wouldn't come back and defeat it, which might be something that's also repeated in Shaw. And yeah, if we get season 3, I'm guessing we'll see this time period and see how they beat the creature. If he did indeed beat it, because you know he said he was moving town. but there was still one night to take it down once and for all. Now, Shaw says the cease and desist letter is what brought his memory back, and Rose says she doesn't want the unmarked burial grounds to be disturbed. Shaw responds though, saying how they're trying to see where they can lay water pipes to the base. He mentions the pipes will come from the Kenduskeag, which is a stream mentioned in the book. It provides water for Derry and fills the sewers, aka Pennywise's hiding place. The Kenduskeag is actually a real-life stream that apparently runs past King's home of Maine. I think the worry is though that if it left the forest through the sewers, then this will allow it to travel even further. As mentioned, she also talks about it being ancient burial grounds, and mate, you'll know if you've ever read a Stephen King book, he fucking loves ancient burial grounds. This, The Shining, I don't wanna be buried in a pet cemetery. All that, mate, that's all got all those ancient burial grounds in. Now, Shaw offers to work together and asks Rose to guide them as to not disturb the tribe's sacred areas. Part of me, though, doesn't believe him, as he does clearly know all about it. He's even remembered Pennywise enough to have the military trying to find traces of him. I feel like Shaw maybe wants to both trick Rose into helping him and also throw her off the scent of what the soldiers are actually doing. Obviously, you know, he's kept the slingshot and it is clear that he knows what's going on. We then cut to the pair running around and having fun in the past. They go swimming just like the Losers Club in Chapter 1 and hang out near the river, which is kind of like the creek. The young Shaw then says how his dad's being shipped out to another base. He asks her to never forget about him, but again, repeating the future, she says that he won't remember her after leaving. It's very reminiscent of Bill and Bev right at the end of Chapter 1, where the pair talk about her going to Portland. Rose then gives him back the slingshot, which again might have been how he actually remembered everything. If the energy was strong enough for Dick to find him, then part of the entity's energy could stop him from forgetting. Either way, we then see his Dick's in a trance as the helicopter flies over the Barrens. This is him shining, and it's similar to the trances Danny had when having visions in the film. Paulie then mentions that a friend of his at Fort Bragg told him about the experiments that were being done on goats at that base. And this is probably referencing the real effort by the US Army to create psychic soldiers. I'm not lying. They were tasked with trying to stop the heart of a goat through using their minds. It was the subject of the book The Men Who Stare at Goats, which was then adapted into a movie of the very same name.
I'd heard that the US government was training psychic soldiers, and that Lynn Cassidy was the best of the best.
The show clearly takes inspiration from that though, and the real-life 1960 experiments like MK Ultra, which were happening around the time. Dick then starts to zone out and walks to the end of the helicopter. It creates a corridor effect, which again feels like what they did at the Overlook. Water then begins to appear, and it looks like the void from Stranger Things. There's a buggy, toy, and a bowling pin just floating in the cistern. They're all items that the missing kids had on them when they were taken, as we see more of them fall from the sky later. This is its lair, and it's the same place the Losers Club faced Pennywise in 1989. The being's cot also there in the same place it was in Chapter 1 when the club saved Bev. We see it open, which is exactly what happened to her, and there she was trapped by its deadlights, which sent you insane when you stared at them. We do get a kind of touch of that insanity as Dick gets further visions upon making eye contact. We see what appears to be what looks like a masquerade party with a jester and clown imagery, possibly linking to Pennywise. What I think it is, though, is that this is actually the masquerade ball that's mentioned in The Shining. That was part of one of the scariest times in the house, and it's what the bear ghost was at. We then see flashes of World War II, or maybe even the Korean War. It's a really intriguing moment because not only does it hint at his past, but it could also hint at his future. And yeah, if this party is happening at the Overlook, it is hinting towards where he's eventually going to end up at. Toys then keep falling, and Dick sees the missing kids floating just like we saw in Chapter 1. Now, I do wonder if Matty and Richie are there as well. I saw a great theory that said, and I'm sorry, I did try and find the comment on the person who pointed it out. I think I replied to you last week, but I couldn't find your comment, unfortunately. But they said that as their faces weren't messed up on the cereal boxes, they could have been just taken like Bev. I did check to see if I could see them in the sky, but couldn't make them out. However, Maddie was just taken in the car, and we didn't actually see him get killed, so it might be a possibility. Dick then sees his grandmother, who we actually mention in The Shining. She's the person who taught him how to use his powers, and he did say they'd have psychic chats for hours. And I'm not a rapper. He also mentioned her in Dr. Sleep, as she was the one who taught him to put dangerous visions inside a box. It's something he also taught Danny to do, and it was so cool seeing all this amount of attention to detail that they're putting into Dick's character. I also wonder if Dick's granddad's gonna appear at some point as well. Dr. Sleep explains that he used to abuse him, and he was feared by everyone in the family. Even him sitting down at dinner would scare people into not talking. Eventually he died though, and everyone felt relieved, and Dick thought that was it. However, he then started to see visions of his ghost, and he'd appear in the night sitting at the bottom of his bed. And unfortunately, he was even more wicked in the afterlife. However, this is where Dick developed how to put people in boxes, and he shut them away and finally out his life. So yeah, I do wonder if they'll touch upon their character, but the granny is also pretty terrifying as well. What it does is shake him to his core, and you can tell he knows they shouldn't be messing with this kind of thing. Of course though, Shaw will no doubt carry on, despite the warning, because he wants to stamp out communism. Now, Dick describes Pennywise as being cold, and in the book the kids talk about how there's a constant smell of dampness around the clown, like rotten leaves. This is the smell of the sewers, which ends up infesting their lungs. I feel like Pennywise has imprinted itself on Dick in some way, and just like how the Overlook tries to claim Danny to boost its own powers, it could possibly be doing the same with him, which then might let it escape the forest. Dick could possibly also work out where it's based due to what he saw in the sky. In the book though, people went missing in all the tunnels like all the time, so pulling that off might be a bit tricky. Basically, what I'm saying is Pennywise is everywhere, and that includes our merch store below. There we have not only our Derry shirts, but we've also got our Pennywise one as well. We've also just launched this, mate, hot off the press. Just launched this Predator Badlands one as well, which is inspired by the brand new movie. I'm going to tell you as well, mate, tell you a little secret, yeah? The more shirts you buy, the more of a discount you get. So the more you buy, the more you save. No, but huge thank you if you picked one of those up. Makes a massive difference to the channel, let me tell you. And it all goes towards helping videos like this get made, so thank you. Anyway, back with Will and his mate, they're having burgers and milkshakes, the true American dream. We then see Lily's mum working at the diner, and this is a bit of a deep cut, I think. In the book, a kid calls Bev's mum a whore, and she screams out, "She's not a whore, she's a waitress." Everyone kind of pauses for a second, and then the Losers Club all burst out laughing, and she's like, I don't even know why I said that. It's good she's a waitress. But yeah, I did wonder if they were referencing that. I might have read the book way too much recently, but yeah, just something that popped into my mind when I was watching this scene. They then discuss Alan Shepard, aka the first American in space. After this, the conversation swiftly moves onto who has the best tatas in class. Richie says Dolores has the best, but Marge has the best face, so who do you go for? All the while, though, you have You'll Never Walk Alone playing, which is the same song we heard when he saw her last week. He even sees her in slow motion and shit, like the fucking lady in red bit from Dodgeball. This moment is ruined though, as Lily and Ronnie asks Will if he can develop film for them. He doesn't think Ronnie's dad's a killer, and Rich says that Will has a crush on Ronnie. He plays coy and denies it, though they did have a connection last week in detention. I do even wonder if the pair will end up together, and then they'll be Mike's parents. That does kind of go against the book though, and if you saw our spoiler section last week, then you'll know how things go. But yeah, it does clearly get into his head as he panics when he accidentally touches Ronnie's hand later in the episode. They then all meet at the Derry Standpipe, which is the place where Teddy and Richie had their clubhouse. Makes sense for this to be a sanctuary as well, as it towers up in the air and it juxtaposes the sewers down below. Rich then says it's an Arika after the kid lists the ways Pennywise attacked them. He mentions that a Santeria priest taught them about Arikas, who were deities of the Yoruba people. Did I butcher that? Let me know below. They range from primordial beings that existed before humans, ancestors who were deified, or other natural phenomena. They act as something between humans and gods, and he says they can summon one so the kids can then photograph it. While Will is out doing that, we then see Dick arrive for dinner at the Hanlons. As Leroy closes the door, people give him dirty looks, and it really drives home they're not welcome in the suburbs. Dick then says he can taste the Spanish saffron in the food, and there's not much Cajun food in Derry. This moment actually foreshadows his role as a cook later in The Shining, and just seeing him pick out the flavours I thought was a really nice touch. However, in the source material for it, he was actually a cook at the base, as opposed to being like a psychic soldier. Dick then says how she clearly doesn't like it here. She was a teacher at a black school, but here the only jobs available were clerical work, which she feels overqualified for. Now, she was involved in the civil rights movement, but Leroy worried it might hurt his chance of moving up in the Air Force. So there's clearly some resentment there, which I do suspect Pennywise may exploit down the line. Dick then asks where his son is, which seems to take Leroy back. Later on, we learn Leroy never told him about his son. As we know though, Dick can read minds, and right now, he's seeing you hit the subscribe. On the porch, they do share a Budweiser though, as Dick compliments his wife's cooking. Leroy finally asks about what happened in the chopper, and though Dick can't tell him, he says his grandmother said it's like seeing things without seeing things, which is sort of similar to the speech he gives Danny about what The Shining is. Leroy explains that he's heard of it, but has never actually seen it for himself, which I did find really interesting. He's not happy though that Dick went into his brain, and he matches the feeling up with the attackers. In a big twist, it turns out that Dick was actually one of the attackers who formed part of Shaw's test. He says that he saw Leroy was just analysing the situation and wasn't scared at all, while other men would be. Still though, he watched him get beaten and attacked, and was even complicit in it, which I do think will cause some shaky grounds beneath them. However, it does also explain why, when they met in episode 1, he was driving him about the base, he kept looking, almost as if he was trying to get into his mind. What Shaw was doing during this was testing the effects of the amygdala damage, and he asked Dick to see if he was really incapable of feeling fear. Meanwhile, the kids are preparing their ritual to summon the entity, but Rich seems apprehensive about performing it. Probably because it's all secondhand knowledge and he isn't 100% despite seeming confident to the kids. It's kind of like an Ouija board scene in movies, and it's sort of like inviting the creatures in.
It's all bullshit!
Rich repeats the prayer and then agrees they should face out from each other, with him clearly just winging the whole thing. He then gets caught in his lie as he mentions his cousin said you can leave the circle and come back as long as you do it quickly.
Bullshit.
It's what's known as a Cuban Santeria ritual, and with the Cuban Missile Crisis looming, I also wonder if his heritage will become a big thing as well. Will then offends Ronnie as he doesn't believe in the supernatural. He's a man of science, while she's more a person of faith, mainly because she's experienced it. Now to me, this is their ritual of Chud, as they should be in a circle all working together, but they end up arguing. As we mentioned, the original natives attempted to perform the ritual but failed, and this is something that Mike kept from the Losers Club, which then caused a big argument. It also reminds me of the argument that the Losers Club had after they ran out of the house on Nearbolt Street in Chapter 1. In the end though, they all need to be on the same page to defeat Pennywise, as the losers defeated it by sticking together. And yeah, we know it doesn't get banished, so good luck guys, I think you're pretty screwed. As of now though, the ritual does seemingly work as the Jesus statue turns. And yeah, I don't know why, but this made me burst out laughing. If you found it, just the expression on it mate, but if you found it scary, let me know, but I just thought it was hilarious. What I did like though is how the gate gets further and further away, showing the kids that they're about to face their fears. We then see a headstone for Theodore Burgess, and though I couldn't find any major significance of this name, I do think that it might belong to Teddy. Teddy, short for Theodore, and we do see the spirit of Teddy chasing Lilly later on. The ground then starts collapsing, and this also happened in the book. There, the sewers collapsed after Pennywise was defeated, which leveled most of Derry. Rich then sees Dale, who might be his cousin that he mentioned earlier, and Lilly tries to photograph the horrors. In the book, Bill was constantly chased by the creature on his bike, with that having the nickname of Silver. As in, hi-yo, Silver! So yeah, a little reference to the bike chase here, I feel. It's a proper Scooby-Doo-esque scene though, as Susie chases Will and Teddy provides an almighty jump scare. And now I know I sound like I'm slagging it off mate, but I love the mad chase to get to the camera. This ends up with Will making his way back to the crypt, which was a good moment, and I will forgive the proper Ghostbusters Afterlife type shit mate. I did like as he bent down to pick it up, and we could see it walk through the archway behind him. We then finally see the Pennywise we know, or at least its hand as it puts it on the wall. Luckily Will gets a photo of the horrific cosmic entity, even if we don't really get to see it. But I did wonder if the camera almost acted like a shield. In the book it went to attack Stan, and then he held out his bird book and shouted out some bird names.
I'm not going to make any tit jokes.
This was an act of defiance against it, and it stopped the creature in its tracks, which clearly happened here as well. They then hug just like the kids did after defeating Pennywise the first time, and it's much like the Losers Club pact. The kids then manage to break into the school, and the sign states that there's also a curfew in effect. This was put in place during the book after a couple of kids went missing, and clearly the police are now having to do the same thing. They then set up the dark room, and again, this scene is just like the one in Stranger Things. It also makes the room red, which kind of riffs off the cinema scene in episode 1, and then the bed scene in episode 2. Even the light bulb going red kinda looks like a balloon. Slowly they then get to the photos of Susie, and then the one in the crypt. Shocked they managed to see a clown, and it reminds me of the book where the photo album came to life, which was also featured in the miniseries. For chapter 1, that was updated to the slide projector, and I half expected Pennywise to jump out the photograph, just like what he does in the movie and book. Closing out the episode, we then hear The Devil Caught Me Napping by Andrea and Irvin Litke. But yeah, the kids have proof now. However, I actually don't think the adults will be able to see it. Similar to how they couldn't see the Blood and Bill's photo album, or yeah, as mentioned, the blood in the bathroom. I think this is just going to show something innocuous. But yeah, whether or not that happens, we will discuss it next week. But as for this one, I really enjoyed it, and so far we're 3 for 3. I do think it does get a bit goofy at times, and that's kind of the case with the movies as well, I feel. But yeah, overall, it's a great recreation of the tone in the books, and actually a really nice expansion of a cycle. You know, we haven't really had this 50s stuff in Machete's world, and I feel like they're doing a good job with it. Obviously though, let me know your thoughts below, and please drop a like on the video and just a comment saying, wow Paul, what a great job you've been doing on these breakdowns. 50 minutes long, some of them. Oh, congratulations, you sound like you have a good life. Anyway, if you want to follow me on Instagram and keep up to date with what I'm doing, be honest with you mate, I'm probably making 50-minute long videos, so I don't know how interesting it's going to be, but if you want to check me out, good for you. And if your girl follows me, mate, and you don't, you know what's happening there. But yeah, did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to videos like this every single week? If you click the join button, you guys get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else, and it all costs just 99 cents a month. So it's an amazing bargain for anyone out there who likes just watching content about movies. You know, we're not too negative, we're not too positive, we're kind of in the middle where it's like, yes, here's some facts about it, but we're not going to hate on it, we're not going to overly praise it either. But yeah, I hope you guys loved it, and I'll see you on the next one. Now, if you want something else to watch, we've got a big breakdown on screen right now going over every time Pennywise was hidden in the background of a scene. Have we done the video before? Yes, we bloody have, but we've updated it now because the last one got like 9 million views and I'm trying to milk it. Anyway, with that out of the way, a huge thank you for sticking through this video. I've been your host, Paul. You've been the best. I'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.